Welcome to Cover to Cover Book Beat. I'm your host, Roger Nichols. This is author interview number 887. Our guest today, Dr. Peter Kowey, has a stellar reputation and medical background. A list of his honors and qualifications is so long we can only hit a few of the highlights in the time that we have today. He is professor of medicine and clinical pharmacology at Thomas Jefferson University, a fellow of the American Heart Association, the American College of Cardiology, the American College of Physicians, and the Heart Rhythm Society. Dr. Kowey is an internationally recognized expert in heart rhythm disorders, a recipient of over 150 grants, written over 450 papers and scientific reports, co-edited 5 textbooks on cardiac arrhythmia. He is uniquely qualified to write today's book, Failure to Treat: How a Broken Healthcare System Puts Patients and Practitioners at Risk. Before I bring on Dr. Kowey, I want to stress the importance of the message delivered in Failure to Treat. I've been doing these interviews for 15 years now, and if I had to choose one book from all the 887 that I can ensure that everyone in America would read, it would be this one. And with that, we're very pleased to welcome Dr. Peter Kowey.
Thank you, Roger. First of all, I'm enormously grateful for the opportunity to talk to you today. It's not just about the book, but about the issues.
All right. Before we delve into the book itself, I do want to go into a little bit of your personal history. Were you always going to be a doctor?
Yeah, there's a couple of stories in the book that relate to this question because when I was a kid, neither of my parents got out of high school. My father was a truck driver, and I didn't know anybody in Madison. The only person I knew was our family doctor, and our family doctor was God. Yeah. I mean, we went to the family doctor. He didn't have a nurse or a secretary in his office. You didn't get an appointment. You just went in, and he took you in turn. Mm-hmm. When he brought you in, he was meticulously dressed. He was very, very stately guy. He would give you your shots. He would give you your pills. He would talk to you as long as you wanted to talk to him. And I was so impressed with this guy that when people would ask me when I was 5 years old what I wanted to be, I would say I want to be a doctor. I had absolutely no idea what I was talking about, but it was that man who influenced my life.
Amazing. One of the things we did not mention in the introduction is, in addition to the several nonfiction books related to cardiology, you've written 5 very well-received medical mystery books. Was there an event or series of events that led you to writing A, the mystery books, and B, this particular book?
The thing that got me started on the medical mystery books was actually a malpractice case that I was testifying as a defense expert, and there was a bunch of stuff being said about the defendant doctor that was actually false. And I was sitting in the courtroom getting ready to testify, becoming progressively more angry. And I went back at that one. I was having dinner with my wife, and I was expressing my anger, and she said, "Look, you've always wanted to write." I was interested in creative writing in college. She said, "You've always wanted to do creative writing. Why don't you write about this?" And so that's what I did. I wrote that story, but fictionalized it, turned it into a medical murder mystery novel, whatever. And that's what got me started. That's what got me started on the path to writing. This book, Failure to Treat, is similar because, again, it was a bitching session with my wife. And when she said, "I'm tired of listening to you complain about this stuff. You've seen 1 million patients in your career. You've had lots of patient contact. Why don't you use that and write some stories?" It was her idea, and it was brilliant.
As a long-time and continuing working journalist, I'm always on the lookout for the telling detail. I knew I was in a great experience coming down right in the prologue, in which you talked about one of your mentors, Dr. Bernard, I hope he's pronouncing it Lown or Lown, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. And you talked about the fact that if a doctor sits down, it's an indication he's paying attention to you. And how long has it been? Thank you for getting me excited about that, because I knew that this is going to be good. You've written Failure to Treat in such a way it's very easily accessible to the lay public without dumbing it down, and that's a tricky tightrope to walk. And I will tell you, you pull this off with grace, which is not a common adjective in describing the written word. And you also chose not to cite references in the literature to bolster your arguments. Will you share with our listeners why you did that?
Well, you hit it right on the head. It was all about the people reading it. One of the things when I decided to go back and do some creative writing, I took some night courses, and This is like 15 years ago at Penn. And one of the things that the professor kept hammering is think about your audience. Always think about your audience. And so I'm sitting there trying to figure out, like, one of my patients reading this thing, can they comprehend it? Can they understand it?
Mhm.
So that's why I did what I did in terms of the explanations. The case explanations that come after the narrative, to me, were the most important things that I wrote, because it was here's the case, but let me explain to you why this case is important and how it relates to you
Mhm.
and your visits with your doctor, et cetera. So it was the audience that really drove me to be very careful with that aspect.
Well, we tell people that there are 20 chapters. Each has a little vignette that demonstrates one of the problems facing the system, from insurance denials to corporate takeovers. Each is followed by a commentary, a conclusion, and patient advice. You set out that way, or did that kind of evolve as you were planning the book?
I did the narrative and case explanation and commentary, but it was actually my publisher who read the book and said, you're missing a piece at the end of each chapter or each story. You need to not just tell the story and all the negative stuff, but you got to give people some idea of how they might be able to navigate this thing and maybe prevent it. And that's what the patient advice thing came in. It was a great idea. I mean, obviously, it turned the book into more than just a storytelling episode, but actually something that patients may be able to use to help their own care.
Yeah. We can't go into all of those factors in the time we have, but I believe the reader will not find, they're not ordered from worst to least, rather on a structure that eases the reader into the complexity of the system as it's evolved. And that was very deliberate, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. Again, that was my publisher and my publicist
Mm-hmm.
reordering the stories to make sure that I did exactly what you. It's very perceptive of you that you noticed that, but that's exactly what the intention was, to ease people into the book, and also the patients into the book. The practitioners' stories, a lot of those come a little bit later in the
Mm-hmm.
book, because again, the other part of my audience here were practitioners,
Right.
not just doctors, but nurses and nurse practitioners and physicians assistants and people who participate in the healthcare system. And so I needed to make sure that I had stories for all of them.
Yeah. And I'm not going to be nearly as well organized as Failure to Treat is, but I want to start with one thing that surprised me. I shouldn't have, in my cynical nature, that at the time the electronic medical records came in, the government, as you put it, unwisely decided to let the market decide. And the fact at the time the Veterans Administration have what you said is a perfectly good, user-friendly system, could have been sold and installed for a fraction of the cost. You call EMRs a doctor-eating monster, which I think is probably true.
Yeah, it's hard to it's hard to tell you, Roger, how bad it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's evil. It is put a wedge between doctors and patients. It has burned doctors out. It has made office practice a dredge and a drudgery,
Mm-hmm.
rather than the pleasant experience we used to have. It's confused people. The cut and paste stuff that I talk about in the book
Mm-hmm.
has led to numerous examples of people being harmed because of misinformation. I mean, it is just terrible. Now, the thing that's really infuriating about this is that it could be a wonderful tool
Mm-hmm.
if it were simpler and if it were less tilted towards billing. I mean, the whole thing was really put into place to make sure that people could be billed. It wasn't about patient care.
No.
If it had been tilted in the direction of patient care and really wanting patients to get better care, it could have been structured a lot differently, but that's not what happened.
No. No. Um, well, as soon as you walk in, here comes the assistant, and they're looking at the keyboard, glancing at you occasionally, and inputting all the latest stuff with your blood pressure and whatnot. So that's kind of, as you put a distance right from the beginning of it. And yeah, gosh, there's so many aspects of this, but you mentioned also there's no premium in being a good side clinician anymore. Talking to and examining patients not rewarded the same way ordering those tests and getting those procedures done. That's where the money is, and that's where the pressure is.
I don't know whether you saw it in the news today, but there was a study showing that there's a phenomenon called downcoding, which is what insurance companies do to reduce the reimbursements for certain parts of medical care. They've downcoded office visits across the board. These are public insurance, these are medical insurance companies by 15% over the last 3 years. So doctors are actually getting even less money for seeing patients in the office, just seeing patients in the office, not doing procedures and all the other crap, but just seeing patients. We're now getting paid at a time when obviously the cost of living is going up. So the real reduction is immense.
Yeah. At local hospitals in the area have let people go because they did not see enough patients to meet their quota. And this has people really up in arms locally about that. And I won't go into personal stuff, but I had a similar situation with a doctor that did both my knee replacements, was summarily fired because he'd taken too much time to be with people. Used to be, as you point out, you went to the doctor, you paid in cash, he worked alone, maybe he had a secretary, maybe not, maybe a nurse. And now he is so overwhelmed with everything, he can't deal with that. And then he joins an organization that handles the billing for him. And then again, he gets pressured to see a few people. There's this kind of unholy alliance, in a way, between the Trial Lawyers Association and the insurance companies.
Oh my. Yeah. The Trial Lawyers Association is the second evil empire, right? They have absolutely raped the medical care system. They have extracted literally hundreds of millions, maybe billions of dollars directly out of the system. Here's an example, Roger, that's not in the book, but there's a medical malpractice attorney in Philadelphia who has had two law schools named after him, donating $50 million to each of them. So how much money does that guy have that he can give away $100 million just so he can have his name on a law school?
Yeah.
Gives you some idea of the magnitude of the amount of money that's being drained out of the system because our malpractice, our rotten, terrible malpractice system allows people like this to make that kind of money.
As some people pointed out, it's one thing to have 100 million; it's another to have 100 million to spare. That's amazing. I want to tell you a short story about our local experience, but I think you can relate to it. A local hospital, which was formerly known as Mid-Columbia Medical Center, a 49-bed acute care, first in the nation to be certified as a patient-centered plane tree hospital with no limit on visiting hours, accommodations for families to stay, and even home-cooked meals for patients. Bill Moyers even came to our little town of the Dalles, Oregon to interview the then CEO, but they couldn't sustain the model. And 2 years ago, taken over by Adventist Medical, and just this week, they announced they want to shrink it from 49 to 25 beds to become a critical care facility because higher Medicare payouts. This is happening at a time we shouldn't be reducing capacity at a time when who knows when the next pandemic is going to sweep through.
The hospital closure rates in this country are frightening. I believe currently this year, 14% of hospitals in this country are either going to file for bankruptcy or already have. Over 50% of the hospitals in the United States operate in the red already. So the reason why what's happening with this budget impasse with the Democrats is so important is because if they succeed in cutting the reimbursements for Medicaid or the subsidies for Obamacare, and hospitals have fewer dollars, we're going to see even more hospitals doing what your hospital has done, either closing or significantly limiting service. You remember in the book, there's a story about that couple moved to a rural area thinking that they had a hospital within a few miles of them. But when their kid got sick, there was nobody around because the hospital emergency room had closed.
And you think of emergency rooms always 24/7, not when they can't afford to. And that's, who knows, that's like a harbinger of the fact that the hospital is probably going to have to close down the road if they can't keep the ER open. There's so many other things going on. One of the things is, as a result of this, you get these, how shall I put it, hospital administrators who suck huge salaries out of the system without maybe helping a great deal.
Yeah, did you enjoy the story, the administrating story? Yeah. There's a term that's been coined Roger, that I mentioned in the book called Administrative Harm. And so for years we just sort of thought, well, there's these guys, they're managing stuff, and it's the doctors that are really responsible for what happens in the hospital and the quality of care. Well, that's not good. By squeezing our staffs down to smaller sizes, by laying off nurses, and by making decisions about how they spend money, by spending incredible amounts of money on advertising. Think about how much money hospitals spend to advertise. Who gives a crap about an advertising for a hospital? When you're sick, you go to the hospital that you can go to, right? I mean, you don't, I'm not having a heart attack. Let me think, where did I see that commercial about somebody who takes care of heart patients? But they're squandering huge amounts of money, and the administrators who are running the hospitals are responsible for this. And it's become a very, very large problem. There's a CEO in the Philadelphia region who's being paid in excess of $10 million a year.
Wow.
And what planet does that make any sense? That somebody in a healthcare administrative position should be making that much money? It makes no sense whatsoever.
And you actually cite in the book an administrator who got a fat golden parachute after hospitals under his care closed.
Yeah. True story. Yeah.
What is being rewarded in that particular case? That is just insane. Then there's the fact that, to go to another aspect of health is the unregulated claims by pharmaceuticals that are not really pharmaceuticals, so we can't, the over-the-counter stuff that is not counted as drug, though it's taken as drugs.
Yeah, the loophole has been that if you can prove that you're a food substance rather than a drug, so that's what things like these silly drugs for dementia or erectile dysfunction. But that's what if you can say that I am not a drug, but I am just a food derivative, then you can basically say anything you want. All you need is to have a couple of people say, yeah, I took that stuff and it worked. And then you can say whatever you want on television.
Yeah, and size does matter in this case, in terms of size and study. If you've got, as you point out, you've got 5 people and 2 of them say, yeah, it's 40%. That's an amazing result. Well, it's also lying with statistics, I have to say. Wow. And of course, the insurance companies, in response to all of this, as you saw, say they place callers on hold, ignore emails. They generally waste their time dealing with insurance companies, trying to get compensated for work that's already done. Should not be a difficulty.
Think about Roger, the fact that that CMS recently announced that they're going to use artificial intelligence for pre-certifications. Think about it. Yeah. They're actually going to do that, and some insurance companies have already started to do that. Yeah. They claim that somebody's going to oversee it and that they'll make sure that it's done fairly, et cetera. But that's not going to happen. They're going to let some computer decide whether you can have your echocardiogram or not. And once they do that, once they deny the coverage, it becomes a slog to try to go back into the system and convince them that that's a mistake. And whose responsibility is that? It's the doctors, who already don't have enough time to even take care of the patients they're seeing, have to spend time on the phone trying to get somebody to make an agreement that they can have the test. It's a bad system.
It is indeed. And I'm just reading an article in the New Yorker from a couple of weeks ago about AI, and the number of hallucinations is what they call it, things that the AI makes up trying to please the algorithm. That's really a danger to be concerned with. Yeah,
for sure. I think AI in general in medicine, it can be as evil as, if not even more evil than the EMR. I think we need to be very, very careful how we implement this and how we supervise. Remember, if the doctors are already really, really pressed for time, so they're going to be grasping at ideas about how they can reduce their time commitments. AI is an area where they could logically go, but if they just accept it without making sure that it's doing the right thing, then patients will be harmed.
Yeah, who watches the watchers, as they say. And then you have the phenomenon of drug companies advertising to the public. Ask your doctor about Ozempic, or whatever it is that they're plugging at the moment. And then here's your doc sitting there, has got 10 minutes, and the guy's pressuring him to, okay, sure, fine, just to get out of the way and do the next thing. That's not a good situation.
Yeah, there are only two countries in the world, Roger, where you can do direct-to-consumer advertising: the United States and, for some reason, New Zealand. Go figure.
Yeah.
I have no idea why.
Yeah.
And the reason I was on a podcast yesterday with somebody from the UK, and they were actually giggling about the fact that we do this in this country. They think it's so ridiculous they can't even talk about it.
Yeah.
It's absurd, and the absurdity is when did you see the one, by the way, where they had a schizophrenia drug, and they had a schizophrenic patient recommending that you should take it?
Yes.
Now, hello?
Yeah.
Hello? Please help me with this. Why would I possibly listen? I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad person, but it's a schizophrenic.
He's not competent in that particular area. But we're so used to third-party referrals that we think this is a good thing. It's not the doctor or the company talking about it. It's just this guy. Yeah, but he's not a qualified guy. So, yeah, insane.
Yeah.
And then there's drug prices. There's big pharma out there, who's another actor in all of this, where our prices in the U.S. are artificially inflated beyond what they do anywhere else in the world, even next door in Canada and Mexico, because they can get away with it. They contribute a great deal to politicians who write the laws.
Well, I think that last statement you made is that the root cause of a lot of the problems that we're having is that medical insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies have very strong lobbies. Mm-hmm. And they also contribute, and trial lawyers, by the way, have strong lobbies, and they contribute mightily to campaigns for the people who are in office. And in exchange for that, obviously get lots of considerations. The drug pricing thing is a complete joke. Think about the fact that there are drugs approved for rare indications that can cost anywhere between $50,000 and $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
And insurance companies are under the gun to pay for those, and the pharmaceutical companies are not held to any kind of cost control whatsoever. It's basically whatever you want to charge is what you could probably collect. And the problem in this country is that in other countries, pricing of drugs is tied to efficacy. So the more effective your drug, the more premium pricing. The NICE, NICE system in England is the best example, where you don't just prove that your drug is effective and safe, but you also have to prove that it's cost effective. And if it isn't better than what's already out there, you can't charge premium pricing. But in this country, that's not what happens. You go to the FDA, and it is basically, is it approved or not approved? And if it's approved, then the drug companies basically can do whatever they want in terms of the pricing, and it really has been very, very injurious to the system.
Well, another factor to that too is that they have a limited amount of time to exploit their unique opportunity as the sole provider of the drug until it goes to generic. So they push, and crank the price up. Well, they get the max.
Yeah. Correct. That's a correct statement.
Yeah, it's amazing. See, I'm just going through my cheat sheet here because by the way, I cut and paste when big chunks of copy, 18 pages from yours, one of the biggest I've ever did, because everything you write is so cogent about what goes on to that. I'm going to scroll down here to something about, and here's where the medical profession itself has a bit of a problem, and that is trying to keep out foreign doctors, people who are well trained, and also not at the and then we go to that's a different subject. But yeah, the fact that nobody wants to give up their monopoly on what they've got.
Yeah, it's created a real crisis. We routinely have people who come to our institution from other countries to learn basic science and some of the research aspects. And these are people who are extremely well trained practitioners in Europe. But in order for them to come to this country and be able to practice, they are expected to repeat their training here before they can get licensed.
Yeah.
It's a complete and utter absurdity. These are people who are better trained than almost all the doctors in this country, and yet that's what they would have to do. And so they that obviously say, I'm not going to go back and be an intern again. Why would I go back and be an intern and resident again? I'm a fully qualified cardiologist. Why would I do that?
Yeah.
So we lose the opportunity to have these very, very competent people who want to come to this country and practice. We can't get them. And so what do we have now? We have an outrageous shortage of doctors in this country. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the statistics. There's an estimate that we're going to be about 50 or 60,000 cardiologists short in the next 10 years because people in my age group are retiring and we're not replacing us fast enough.
Yeah.
And also the burden of cardiovascular disease, the number of people getting into their 80s with cardiovascular disease and in their 90s is increasing tremendously. And we just simply are not going to have enough people to take care of them while we're keeping out qualified people.
Yeah, this is the baby boom bulge moving through the population as one of them myself. Yeah. And yeah, again, this is, there's so many aspects to this. Oh, by the way, one nice little touch. I'm a real sucker for somebody that puts quotes at the beginning of each chapter, and which you do. And I'm going to have to learn more about Sir William Osler because he's given about 4 of your quotes here. The greater the ignorance, the greater the dogmatism. Medicine is the science of uncertainty and the art of probability. These are incredibly nice insights into things. So thank you for adding that as a little frosting on the cake, as it were.
You're welcome.
There's so many things that are intertwined in this, but if you had, talking to the people that are listening now, the thing that you think that most they could do to change the system, what would that be?
Well, first of all, I think for ourselves, as I said, sort of towards the end of the book and the overall conclusions, everybody do everything you can to find someone you trust who works within the healthcare system, whether it's your primary care doctor, somebody in your family, a friend, somebody that you can consult, and not in depth, but basically to get some idea of what their ideas are about a particular issue, but also to get referrals. Like who's a good orthopedic surgeon and who's a good obstetrician, et cetera. That's number one. Number two is, as all of us, doctors and their patients and practitioners and patients, need to be very active getting to our legislators to make them understand what the problems are that we're experiencing. My wife came up with the idea, by the way, of me sending, and I'm going to do this, by the way. I just have to figure out how I'm going to do it. Sending a copy of this book to every member of Congress and everybody in our state legislature and tell them, take a look at this and you can see what your constituency is going through. They need to be aware of how bad it is on us. And the fact that if they don't do something to fix the system, and we could talk about what some of those things are, that they're not going to get reelected. The problem is we've not been able to galvanize the public enough to make that happen, and it's really what has to happen in order to affect change.
Well, I will tell you that reading this book has made me resolve to contact both my senators and my representative. One of our senators in Oregon, Senator Ron Wyden, said 10 years ago, one of the things I recorded him, he said, the problem is not the amount of money spent in the system. The problem is where it's spent. He said, and he gave the number at what it was at that time. He said, for that amount of money, we could hire a doctor for every 10 people in the United States and pay them $100,000 a year. We're spending it on the wrong stuff. So
we spend nearly $5 trillion in this country. That comes down to something around $13,000 to $15,000 a person. Think about it. And so his calculus, by the way, is exactly right. So 10 people, 13,000, that's $130,000. That's your doctor, right? And so 10 people could have their own physician taking care of them for that kind of money. We are squandering. By the way, the projection for 2035 is going to be $8.5 trillion in healthcare. It's monstrous. But the thing that's even the most infuriating is that we rank at the bottom or near the bottom for every healthcare quality metric you want to use. Life expectancy, infant mortality, vaccination rates, the things that World Health Organizations look at in terms of relative benefits. We're just not getting anywhere.
Yeah. Well, and I know that one of the things you talk about is the people forget about the anti-vax people forget that the reason that we stopped having COVID problems is we got enough vaccinations out there to create herd immunity for the country. And I just have to ask this: are you risking a bit in this current anti-science climate by coming out this way?
Of course I am, but it's funny because when I was conceiving this book and I was writing it again, my wife and I had several conversations about and I warned her. Yeah. I said, people may very much come after me for this because I'm saying things that are not necessarily popular. And she said, you need to say what you need to say. And I did. And I'm willing to accept those consequences. But you can't argue this, Roger. I mean, 5 years ago, we had refrigeration units in our parking lot of our hospital where we were putting bodies because we didn't have enough room in the morgue in the hospital. We were tripping over bodies, right? And literally, of people who were dying from COVID. 1 million Americans died in that pandemic. And we can't remember this? And we can't remember that and the one thing that Trump did during his first administration was the most brilliant thing he did was warp speed, right? It was getting the vaccine out. And if it hadn't been for that, we might not even be on this call right now because I probably would be dead.
Yeah.
So it's incredible to me that people can forget that. And then we put an anti-vax maniac into a position as HHS secretary just to throw some gasoline on the fire and make people even more paranoid about vaccines that were life-saving.
And then fire a bunch of the people at the National Institutes of Health and the CDC and all of that stuff. Yeah. Well, what was it? There was a book titled many years ago, Cry for the Beloved Country, and that's kind of where I feel we are right now. Is there anything I haven't asked you about you want to make sure gets out to our listeners today?
I would like people to get the book and read it. I think we have to start the conversation. And in order to start an intelligent conversation, you need to know what the facts are. Yeah. And as you said, the book puts forward several facts. For example, one of the things that came out in the book that a lot of people have told me they never made the connection. The connection between the fact they ring a call bell in the hospital and no nurse comes. Yeah. And they get all pissed off for good reason. I mean, they need a bedpan and they can't get a bedpan.
Yeah.
They never made that connection between that and the fact that we have more administrators in our health system than we have nurses. Okay. That's what the problem is. The problem is we're misappropriating money in hospitals for overhead that we don't need. Or we're spending money on advertising or all the other stuff that we do. That's why we don't have more nurses. And, there have been several articles in the local Philadelphia paper about nurses quitting because they're frightened. And what they're frightened about is they don't think they can protect the patients in the hospital because there's not enough nurses. Yeah. And they're worried that if they work there, they're going to be responsible for somebody dying. There was a nurse that said, I was in such a hurry that I loaded the wrong drug into the syringe and was on my way to the patient when it hit me that I had done the wrong thing and I went back and fixed it. Yeah. That medical mistakes happen, and they're going to happen a lot more frequently in understaffed hospitals. So we don't have a choice. We need people to understand these relationships and these facts. And the only way to start is to read the book and understand what the problems are, and then try to do some of the things that we've talked about in terms of trying to fix it.
Yeah, and this book, as we record this, book came out just a couple of weeks ago, and it's already getting very positive reviews from many, many people, which I'm going to add to. Our guest today has been Dr. Peter Kowey. The book is Failure to Treat: How a Broken Healthcare System Puts Patients and Practitioners at Risk. Thank you so much for being gracious with your time today.
Roger, as I said, I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.